This video will show you how to assemble the RadWagon 4. Photograph all four sides of the box and the label with the serial numbers. Make sure the label is easy to read and keep the photos for your records. Open the bike box and get a friend to help you carefully lift the bike out of the box, rest it on the rear wheel and front fork protector plate, and stabilize it while you remove the packaging. Remove the packaging material from everything except the handlebar for now, and make sure you don't touch the brake rotor. Leave the keys zip-tied to the bike until you're ready to ride. Recycle the packaging material according to local rules, unless you'd like to keep it for shipping your bike. Snip the zip ties to remove the front wheel, fender, and kickstand, and set them aside. Then, remove the small box from the bottom of the bike box. This contains the owner's manual, the charger, assembly toolkit, headlight, front fender mounting hardware, Deflopilator spring and mounting hardware, the kickstand mounting hardware, and the pedals. The assembly toolkit includes a variety of tools of various styles and sizes to help with the assembly. You will use many but not all of these tools to assemble the bike. We also recommend using a pair of flat side cutters, a pedal wrench, a bike pump with a Schrader valve and a pressure gauge, a torque wrench with a set of Allen bits, bicycle grease, and a friend to help with the assembly. Start by rotating the stem and front fork so the front brake cable is on the rider's left side and no cables are wrapped around the back of the head tube. On the steer tube, use a 5mm Allen wrench to remove the temporary top cap bolt and cardboard spacer. Recycle these according to local rules. The rest of the components should remain in place. Remove the packaging from the handlebar. Orient the handlebar so the brake levers face forward and the 3-button remote is on the rider's left side. Press the stem release button and open the lever at the same time. Note that the stem has a built-in top cap bolt which needs to line up with the center of the star nut inside of the headset. Slide the stem onto the steer tube until the base of the top cap bolt meets the top of the star nut. If needed, use an Allen wrench to loosen the stem clamp bolts to make it easier to slide the stem onto the steerer tube. Once the stem is on the steerer tube as far as it can go by hand, use an extra long Allen wrench to tighten the top cap bolt until the gap between the bottom of the stem and the spacers has closed, and just until the spacers cannot spin. Do not over-tighten. Ensure the brake levers face forward and trace the brake cable from the left brake lever to the brake caliper. Make sure the bundle of cables at the front of the bike is not twisted. Adjust the angle of the handlebar as shown, making sure to stay within the range of the markings shown on the side of the stem. Center the handlebar, press the stem release button, and carefully close the lever, keeping everything clear to avoid being pinched. Once closed, the lever should be centered over the stem housing and the locking mechanism and stem release button should have clicked into place. The handlebar and stem should feel secure once the lever is closed. Next, fully secure the handlebar stem to the steerer tube by tightening the stem clamp bolts evenly. Use a 5mm Allen wrench to tighten the top bolt just until you feel some resistance. Then repeat with the bottom bolt. Use a torque wrench and alternate between the two bolts, tightening each bolt 1/4 turn at a time until they're both evenly torqued to 10 Nm. Locate the kickstand mounting hardware and slide the washer over the bolt end. Orient the kickstand properly as shown so the kickstand ends fold towards the back of the bike. Place the kickstand under the mounting hole in front of the rear wheel. Pass the bolt end through the kickstand mounting hole and into the kickstand. Use an 8mm Allen wrench to tighten the bolt securely and torque to 50 Nm.
Depending on when your bike was manufactured, it is possible that you may receive a bike with either a front wheel with a bolt-on axle mechanism or a quick-release skewer mechanism. Remove the protective plates from the front wheel and inspect the axle. Front wheels with the bolt-on axle will come with pre-installed nuts on the axle. If you have this type of front wheel, proceed with the following steps. Front wheels with the quick-release mechanism will have a shorter through axle where the quick-release skewer is inserted. If you have this type of front wheel, skip to the next section. During assembly, be careful not to touch the brake rotor, which has sharp edges and can cause serious injury. and leave oils from your hand on the brake rotor, which can lead to diminished braking performance. Rest the front wheel on its side with the brake rotor facing up. Front wheel with bolt-on axle installation. Use these steps to install a front wheel with a bolt-on axle. Locate and remove the quick-release skewer that holds the fork on the fork protector plate. Open the lever, remove the thumb nut and cone spring on the opposite side, and remove the skewer. The fork and wheel protector plate packaging, including skewer, thumb nut, cone springs, and any spacers, are not used for the front wheel installation and can be recycled according to local rules. Fold up the kickstand and have a friend hold the bike upright and steady for the next few steps while you position and secure the wheel. Loosen the pre-installed axle nuts on the front wheel enough to fit in the fork dropouts, but do not remove them. If the front wheel comes with additional washers, position these against the axle nuts for installation. If there's a spacer between the brake pads and the front caliper, remove it now. With the help of a friend, carefully lift the front of the bike and lower the fork onto the wheel so that the brake rotor enters the caliper between the brake pads and the axle enters the fork dropouts fully. Pay attention to the brake rotor. It needs to slide between the brake pads. Once the rotor is between the brake pads, guide the fork onto the wheel so that the wheel axle enters the fork dropouts. If it's difficult to get the brake rotor between the brake pads, you may need to loosen the brake calipers slightly. Use an Allen wrench to widen the gap between the brake pads by turning the inner pad adjuster out counterclockwise 2 clicks. Stop after you feel 2 clicks or have turned the adjustment bolt 1/4 to 1/2 of a full rotation. When wheel installation is complete, you can turn the pad adjuster back in clockwise if necessary to ensure the brakes engage properly. Check that the wheel is fully seated in the fork dropouts on both sides, the wheel axle is level and parallel to the ground, and that the wheel is centered. Use the 15mm wrench to tighten the axle nuts on both sides of the fork until secure. If the front wheel comes with additional washers, make sure they are positioned against the axle nuts before tightening. Use a torque wrench with a 15mm socket head or crowfoot bit to torque the axle nuts to the value specified in your owner's manual. Test your front wheel installation. Check that the same amount of dropout is visible under the axle on both sides of the fork. If there's a difference, your axle is not fully inserted into both dropouts, and you'll need to repeat the previous steps. If the axle is fully seated, perform the following tests. With your friend holding the front of the bike off the ground, spin the front wheel to ensure it has no wobble or looseness. Second, while straddling the bike with your hands on the handlebars, squeeze the front brake lever with your left hand. Rock the bike forward and backward and ensure the front brake is securely keeping the front wheel from turning and that there's no play or wiggle in the wheel, handlebars, or front fork. Any sign of play or wiggle is a sign that you may not have properly secured the front wheel, and you should repeat the installation process. Perform these tests before every ride. Once your wheel is fully installed and tested for security, skip ahead to the Install the Headlight and Front Fender section. Front wheel with quick-release skewer installation. Use these steps to install a front wheel with a quick-release skewer. Begin front wheel installation by removing the packaging from both sides of the front wheel. Do not touch the brake rotor. Rest the wheel gently on its side with the brake rotor facing up. Locate the quick-release skewer, holding the front fork in the fork protector plate. Open the lever and remove the thumb nut and cone spring on the opposite side. Remove the skewer from the protector plate, keeping the cam follower and the other cone spring in place. Pass the skewer through the wheel hub, starting from the side without the brake disc or rotor. Reinstall the cone spring on the other side. Both cone springs should point inward, toward the wheel hub. Thread the thumb nut just a couple of turns, leaving enough space for the fork dropouts, which are the slots in the fork where the axle goes. Fold up your kickstand. Have a friend hold the bike steady and fully upright for the next few steps while you position and secure the wheel. If there's a spacer between the brake pads and the front caliper, remove it now. Make sure the quick release lever is open, then carefully lift the front of the bike, removing it from the protective plate. The fork packaging includes a fork protector plate with a metal spacer rod and some spacers, which may be black plastic or look like thick metal washers. You can recycle these packaging elements according to local rules. Carefully lower the fork onto the wheel. Pay attention to the brake rotor. It needs to slide between the brake pads. Once the rotor is between the brake pads, guide the fork onto the wheel so that the wheel axle enters the fork dropouts. The axle needs to go all the way into the dropouts. If it's difficult to get the brake rotor between the brake pads, you may need to loosen the brake calipers slightly. Use an Allen wrench to widen the gap between the brake pads by turning the inner pad adjuster out or counterclockwise. 2 clicks. Stop after you feel 2 clicks or have turned the adjustment bolt 1/4 to 1/2 of a full rotation. When wheel installation is complete, you can turn the adjuster pad back in, if necessary, to ensure the brakes engage properly. Check that the wheel is centered and the axle is fully inserted in the dropouts. If the quick release lever is resting on the widest part of the cam follower, like this, turn it slightly so that it nestles into the curve of the cam follower. This is how it should look. Make sure that your friend holding the bike steady has it fully upright with some weight on the front wheel to help ensure that the fork is fully and evenly inserted onto the axle. Again, do not rely on a kickstand to steady your bike. Open the quick release lever all the way. Hold the thumb nut steady with one hand while you spin the quick release lever clockwise with the other hand. Tighten it as much as you can by hand. At this point, the lever should be too tight for you to close halfway. Loosen it by a 1/4 turn and try again. Repeat until you can close the lever halfway. Close the lever. This should be difficult and should leave an imprint in your hand. Fine-tuning the tightness can take several tries. If you are not able to exert great force on the quick release lever, get help from a professional bike mechanic. Double check that the closed lever isn't touching any bike components like the fork or a fender bracket, which could keep it from closing completely. Check that the same amount of dropout is visible under the axle on each side of the bike. If there's a difference, your axle is not fully inserted into both dropouts, and you'll need to repeat the previous steps, starting at the point where you check that both cone springs are pointing inward. Perform 3 tests on your front wheel. First, with your helper holding the front of the bike off the ground, spin the front wheel to ensure it has no wobble or looseness. Second, while straddling the bike with hands on the handlebars, squeeze the front brake lever with your left hand. Rock the bike forward and backward and ensure the front brake is securely keeping the front wheel from turning and that there's no play or wiggle in the wheel, handlebars, or front forks. Third, inspect the quick release lever and ensure it has remained tightly closed and is not touching the front fork or any other part of the bike. Any sign of play or wiggle is a sign that you may not have properly secured the front wheel and that you should repeat the installation process. Perform these tests before every ride. Once your wheel is fully installed and tested for security, you may prop your bike on its kickstand.
To install the headlight and front fender, first use a 4mm Allen wrench to remove the headlight mounting hardware from the fork. Pass the fender from the back of the wheel forward under the fork arch. Pass the bolt through a washer, the headlight mount, the fender mounting point, a second washer, and then thread into the fork arch mounting point. Use a 4mm Allen wrench to tighten the bolt part way. To plug in the headlight connector, align the internal notch and pins and external arrows and press directly together without twisting. Locate the fender mounting hardware and place the fender arm eyelet over the mounting point at the bottom of the fork. Thread the bolt by hand and use a 4mm Allen wrench to tighten. Repeat on the other side. Check that the fender and headlight are centered, and then torque the fender mounting bolt to 6 Nm. Adjust the headlight angle slightly downward so it will not blind oncoming traffic. If needed, use an 8mm wrench and a 3mm Allen wrench to loosen the angle adjustment bolt and angle the headlight downward and then tighten securely. Do not over-tighten. Remove the Deflopilator mounting hardware from the back of the fork. Locate the bag with the Deflopilator spring and other hardware. If not already installed, pass the plastic safety cover onto the spring. Thread the locking nut onto the Deflopilator's eye bolt, about 5 mm as shown. Thread the eye bolt into the mounting point of the down tube, at least 5 mm, and then twist the locking nut against the frame to lock the bolt in place. Prepare the Deflopilator mounting hardware. Pass the bolt through a washer and through the L-shaped bracket as shown, and then through a second flat washer. Hook one end of the spring through the eye bolt, and then hook the other end of the mounting point on the L-shaped bracket. Thread the bolt into the fork mounting point part way by hand, and then use a 4mm Allen wrench to tighten this securely. Torque to 6 Nm. To install the pedals, first apply grease to the threaded portion of each pedal axle. Identify each pedal by the sticker or by the markings on the pedal axle. The right pedal has a smooth axle and threads onto the rider's right side. Carefully thread in the pedal by hand, turning clockwise towards the front of the bike. The left pedal has grooves on the axle and threads onto the rider's left side. Carefully thread in the pedal by hand, turning counterclockwise, also towards the front of the bike. Once each pedal is properly threaded into its crank, use a pedal wrench or a torque wrench with a 15mm crowfoot bit to torque each pedal to 35 Nm. Visually inspect the tires and make sure the tire bead is evenly seated around the rim. Use a bike pump with a Schrader valve and a pressure gauge to inflate the tires to the pressure indicated on the tire sidewall. Do not overinflate the tires. At the seat, open the bottom quick release lever and remove the telescoping seat post. Ensure the seat post clamp is centered over the notch on the seat tube. Apply a small amount of grease to the seat post and insert the seat post so the minimum insertion marking is completely inside the seat tube. Adjust the seat post up or down to a comfortable height and close the lever fully. To add more height to the seat post, open the top quick release lever and extend the seat post as needed. With the lever open, tighten the thumb nut on the clamp until you feel resistance at the lever. Ensure the seat is pointing forwards and close the lever to secure the seat post. There should be enough resistance that each of the two seat post quick release levers leave an imprint in your hand when closing. The seat post should not move once the levers are closed. Use a 5mm Allen wrench to loosen the seat adjustment bolt. Adjust the seat angle and position, making sure to stay within the limit markings on the seat rails. Then torque the bolt to 10 Nm. At the handlebar, check the headset for ideal tightness. The headset is the portion of the bike inside the head tube that connects the front fork steer tube to the handlebar stem. The headset should be tightened enough so there's no forwards or backwards movement inside the headset, and loose enough that the handlebar and wheel can turn freely. To check if the headset is too loose, place one hand over the spot where the handlebar stem meets the bike's head tube. With the other hand squeezing the left brake lever, gently rock the bike front to back. If you feel a knocking sensation under your hand on the stem, loosen the stem clamp bolts evenly, open the stem adjustment lever, and then tighten the top cap bolt 1/4 turn and check again if the headset is too loose. Repeat until the ideal tightness is achieved, and then close the stem adjustment lever and evenly torque the stem clamp bolts to 10 Nm. To check if the headset is too tight, lift the front wheel off of the ground slightly. Turn the handlebar from side to side to check that the wheel and the handlebar can turn freely. Make a note that the turning will be somewhat inhibited by the Deflopilator spring. If the front wheel will not turn easily, or you feel a grinding sensation while turning, the headset is likely too tight. To loosen the headset, first loosen the stem clamp bolts evenly, open the stem adjustment lever, loosen the top cap bolt 1/4 turn, and check again if the headset is too tight. Repeat until the ideal tightness is achieved, and then close the stem adjustment lever and evenly torque the stem clamp bolts to 10 Nm. To adjust the angle of the handlebar and handlebar stem, open the adjustment lever and move the handlebar to the desired position within the range markings on the side of the stem. Ensure the handlebar is centered and positioned so the brake levers are comfortable for the rider to squeeze, and then close the lever. Once the handlebar and stem have been adjusted to the rider, rotate the display so it will be easily visible while riding. Once the stem adjustment lever is closed, check that the lever is centered over the stem and that it's securely locked by pulling up on the lever end as shown. If you have any issues locking your stem lever, contact product support. Before riding the bike, check the security of the handlebar stem clamp by performing a handlebar twist test. Stand at the front of the bike and brace the front wheel between your feet and lower legs. Hold both handlebar grips and push forward with one hand while pulling back with the other hand. Push and pull with about 20 pounds of force with each hand. Then, switch hands so the opposite hands are pushing and pulling with about 20 pounds of force. Make sure the handlebar and front wheel are still properly aligned. Check for any movement or changes in the alignment of the stem relative to the direction of the front wheel. If the stem twists out of alignment, use a 5mm Allen wrench to loosen the stem clamp bolts evenly, a half turn at a time, alternating between bolts, until you can remove them. Apply some grease to the bolt threads and keep the bolts and their split washers nearby for reinstallation. Align the stem so the handlebar is perpendicular to the front wheel as shown. Reinstall the stem clamp bolts and tighten part way until the bolts touch the other side of the clamp and you feel some resistance. Then use a torque wrench to tighten the bolts evenly by turning 1/4 turn and then switching bolts until both bolts are torqued evenly to 10 Nm. Once the torque wrench indicates that both bolts are properly secured, check that each bolt is properly secured 2 more times. Start at the top bolt, torque to 10 Nm, and then switch to the bottom bolt and torque to 10 Nm. Repeat once more to verify the torque of each bolt. Perform a twist test again. If the handlebar and stem can still rotate out of alignment with the front wheel, contact our product support team for more help. If you pass the twist test, meaning that there was no movement in the stem, the bolts have been properly torqued. Snip the zip tie holding the keys to the bike. Use the key to turn on the battery and check that the battery is locked to the frame. Refer to the owner's manual for important details related to safety, maintenance, and component adjustment. Read it fully, keep it for future reference, and download the latest version from the Rad Power Bikes Help Center. Check that all the hardware on the bike is torqued to the recommended values listed in the owner's manual. Test the bike fully and work through the safety checklists in the owner's manual before riding. To make sure your bike is ready for any adventure, we recommend getting a tune-up from a local, certified, and reputable bike mechanic and keeping up with regular maintenance.
Never let anyone operate this bike unless they are at least 16 years old and have read the operating instructions detailed in the owner's manual. The age requirement for e-bikes may be older than 16 in your area. Check your local laws and rules for the areas you intend to ride. Whenever you ride, wear closed-toe shoes, comfortable clothing, and of course, a helmet. Make sure you can be seen by others on the road by wearing bright and reflective clothing and ensuring your headlight and taillight are always on and visible to others. E-bike disc brakes may wear out faster than non-motorized bicycles, requiring more service. Make sure to inspect brake components before every ride and follow the maintenance intervals listed in your owner's manual. Like all vehicles, e-bikes need to be checked regularly to ensure nothing will jeopardize your safety or the safety of those around you. Follow all safety instructions and checklists in the owner's manual. The latest update to the owner's manual for your rad bike is always available on our website at radpowerbikes.com/help. Make it a habit to thoroughly check your bike before every ride. Reach out to our product support team if you have any questions, and ride rad.